Hello and welcome! I'm Smitha Katti. I blog at smilingcolors.com and you can find me on Instagram as The Shiny Nest. In today's tutorial, we're going to be creating watercolor roses. It's a super simple technique and I hope you paint along. I've been sharing a lot of watercoloring videos lately, so make sure you check out my previous videos. This one's about watercolor leaves and this one's about loose watercolor florals. I will link them here. Today's flowers are inspired by Tombow's signature designer Marie Browning. She has an amazing tutorial on the Tombow blog for watercolor roses, and these are the colors she recommended. Tombow Dual Brush pen numbers 985, 703, 755, 443, 177, 346, 195. And doesn't this look like such a pretty color palette already? I will leave the color numbers down below in the description box. I know I always say that and forget to, but today I promise I will leave the info. To enjoy this watercoloring technique using Tombow Dual Brush pens, you need 3 other supplies. You need a paper that is of thick quality. Today I'm using the Mixed Media Sketchbook by Canson, but I very often use the watercolor paper pad too. Now, other than paper, you will also need a paintbrush. This one I'm using is by Winsor Newton. It was a bit of a splurge for me. I've never paid like $10 for one paintbrush before, but this has been worth it. I would highly recommend it for you. Today I'm going to start this video in real time, slow and all. So if you want to follow along and paint with me, go ahead. So I'm going to start with the color number 755, and I'm just going to add 3 or 4 strokes to form the center of the rose. Now this pen, it writes very nicely on the mixed media paper. It doesn't fray at all because this paper particularly has a smooth finish and not much texture to it. Next, I'm going to move to the lighter color. This one is, I think, 703. And I'm going to add larger petals on the outside. I'm overlapping them slightly. It doesn't have to be really precise. You just want a rough overlapping. Now I'm going to dip my paintbrush in water and swipe my brush against the edge of the water bowl so I don't have too much water on my paintbrush. And then I'm just going to come in and start by painting over the darker area. So we'll start with the center of the watercolor rose. And with a damp paintbrush, I'll just go over those petals. And since the Tombow Dual Brush pens are water-based, they react so beautifully with the water and get this watercolor look and feel. Now I'm not washing my brush in between. I'm just going to go over the lighter petals. And I'm just spreading the pigment and the color slowly to form larger petals. You want the outer petals to be a little larger. And just go slow. I'm leaving a little bit of white area in between. Not too much, just a little, because I don't want a lot of bleed to occur right now. At this point, my paintbrush is almost dry. It's just barely damp. And I'm going to use that little bit of wetness and drag the outer color just to form this tissue-like feel of the petals. I'm literally rubbing the paintbrush against the paper slightly, and you can see how it looks like a dainty rose at this point. Okay, now let's get some more water and activate that little yellow dot in the center. And now I'm going to swipe off, remove the excess water from my paintbrush. You want the paintbrush to be damp, not too wet. And I'm going to go over the center petals, like the darker petals. And now I'm going to actually go in and cover up all of those little white areas that I left before. If you add a lot of water to this, you'll have to wait in between doing all of these steps. But because I'm using very little water today, I can actually do all of this back to back and finish the flower quickly. Now my paintbrush has a little bit of the dark pigment. I'm just going to pull that to drag and cover up any white area I can see. You don't want to work over each area too much, it'll just mix all the colors. I'm just adding a few darker strokes towards the outer edge, and that's it, we're going to call it done. Okay, now it's time to add the leaves. I'm using 2 colors, 177 and 195. I'm going to start by adding the tip of the leaf. I'm giving a good inch of space between my flower and the leaf. To paint the leaf, what I'm going to do is wet my paintbrush, and I'm going to start painting with the water outside of where I've drawn, kind of from the leaf tip. And then I'm going to slowly drag the water and the color all the way towards the rose. With the darker color, I'm kind of creating the outline of the leaf. And you can just spread the pigment, spread the water till you have a nice leaf shape. Then I'm just going to go in and activate the center green and leave it. I don't want everything to blend and mix nicely. I'm just going to carefully make the leaf look a little larger. What's important here is just you let it be. If you try to mix it, you'll just end up with one shade and you won't have any variation. So just let it be at this point, and let's start the second leaf. This one is going to be a smaller leaf, a little closer, but the same technique. The leaf tip with a darker color, a V shape, an inverted V shape if you want, and then add some green towards the center. And now again, while painting, I'm using my wet paintbrush to draw the leaf tip first. And then I'm dragging that dark color towards the flower. I'm not really touching the flower because I don't want it to bleed into the flower. But if it bleeds a little bit, I'm not too worried because I like that look too. Once I have a shape that I like, I'll just go in and paint over the other green with the water and let it be. The colors will move a little bit, blend a little bit, and have a nice watercolor look to it. So I've moved my camera here, so hopefully you can have a closer look at how this comes together. We'll start with the darker red and draw 3 or 4 petals to form the center of the rose. I like to overlap the petals again, and then with the lighter pink, I'm drawing the outer petals. You can make this flower as big as you want, and I'm just going to use how much space I have there. That looks about good. Next, you want to add the yellow color just to the center. And now we're ready to paint. So we'll dip our paintbrush into the water, remove a little of the excess, and then start by painting over the darker center petals. Go over them slowly, leave a little bit of gap if you need to. I like leaving a little bit of gap because I don't want all the petals to kind of bleed into each other and form one mass. Just a little bit of gap. And then we'll start spreading the paint for the lighter colored petals. You can see here that for the lighter color petals, the pigment doesn't spread as much as it did with the darker ones. So because the marker got to sit on the paper for a few extra seconds compared to the center, the paper kind of absorbs the color and it's a little difficult to spread it after that. That is why you want to work like I try to draw one leaf and paint over it immediately. You don't want to draw all of your marker lines and then come back to it and paint over with water. That wouldn't work because the paper would absorb all of the pigment and dry. So you want to work on smaller areas and make sure you paint over the water quickly. Like if the paper is wet, then the pigment is easily movable. But you make sure you want to go over it first and make it wet before it dries onto the paper completely. So I'm just using my wet paintbrush to spread the outer petals. I like giving a haphazard look and feel to it. And then I'm just coming back in, going over the center, covering up any of the white areas. I don't like to fuss over this too much. I've learned this the hard way that the more I try to control where I want the color to be, the more frustrating it gets to me and the more unnatural and non-realistic it ends up looking. So my advice is just go over the area once or twice and let the water do the work. Okay, time for a leaf. I did the same thing again. I drew the tip with the darker color and then I added a lighter color for the center. I start by painting with the water. I create a tip first and then I go and activate or go over the green color. And then I just paint to form the leaf shape. You can go over the outer area a couple of times till you have a shape that is nice. And then I go over the center area and I let the colors blend and bleed and I just let it be. I don't want to touch that leaf again if possible. Okay, next leaf, same thing. Darker green and then a little bit of the lighter green in the center. Paint to form the leaf tip first. I like this where I add the pigment away from the flower. I always used to add it next to the flower. This just gives you a couple more minutes where the flower gets to dry and you have more time to work with the leaf. So this one actually you can see I'm trying to go over the area once or twice again and I know I won't end up liking it, but if it doesn't mix, sometimes you have to do that. Alright, 2 flowers down. I like the way both of these look, by the way. So let's start a third flower. any floral composition looks nice when you have odd number flowers, and I always try to have a triangle formation. So if you look, the 3 flowers kind of form the 3 corners of a triangle over here. That's just a good design principle to keep in mind. Now let's wet our paintbrush. Go over the center area first. You'll also realize the more you work with the Tombow Dual Brush pens that some colors are more reactive to the water than others. And that's just the chemical that I use to create the pens. So the lighter color, the 703, that doesn't spread all that much compared to the 755, the one that we use for the center. That one reacts and spreads, and it's so vibrant. That's one of my favorite colors. So I'm just going to go ahead, spread out the outer petals, give it a little bit of a uneven look. You don't want everything to be a perfect circle. You want to add some whimsy to it. And then I like to go in and cover up the white. You can actually leave the white if you want it. It doesn't look bad. It actually looks nice. For some reason, I tend to go over and cover it up. But you can try either technique. Now let's make some more leaves. This is another thing that I always do. Whenever I paint flowers, I make sure that I paint as many leaves. The green in the composition just makes everything pop up. It adds a nice bit of contrast, it adds a detail, and it just makes your flower composition look more happy and more realistic. So this time I did a little bit of drama while painting, and I bumped into the flower and I have a pink bleed in my leaf. I let it be. I kind of like the look. I actually really like the look of bleed in watercoloring. Okay, now that I have 3 flowers, I don't really want a 4th flower. So I'm just going to add a hint of flower at the top corner there. So very messily, I'm going to add few strokes and just spread that with a lot of water. I don't want to have any of the details. I just want like a blob of pink there. So your eye won't naturally be drawn to that corner. Your eye will be drawn to the 3 flowers that we've painted with more detail. But for the leaves, I'm going to add all the details because I like the leaves. I like the way the leaves contrast against the flowers. I'm going to paint the tip with water. I like the way the water just makes the color flow. Isn't that fun to watch? Okay, so once our leaf number 1 is done, don't fiddle with it too much. Let's go over, finish the second leaf. There you go, nice. And now we have a nice floral composition. So here's how this looks from the top. We have 4 flowers, about 8 leaves now. And like you see, the top flower is really messy, and that isn't complete either, but it adds a nice balance to everything else we've created. So we have 2 more markers left in our color palette, a darker green and the blue. So I'm going to use those to create some filler flowers and fill in any of the empty white spaces we have in between. So for my blue flowers, I'm going to just add 3 strokes. So just add blue wherever you have any white space. You always want to have tiny flowers in a floral composition. They kind of draw your eye and add so much more interest to it. Now with the final green color, let's just add a bottom calyx to each of those small flowers and add maybe a little stem connecting it, make it look like it's dropping down. Okay, now with a lot of water, I like to add a lot of water for these. You want them to look abstractish. So I'll paint over the blue, and when you paint over the blue color, your paintbrush actually catches a little of that pigment, and you can go in and fill in some areas if you need to and add more strokes. Because all of the flowers you don't need to draw all of the flowers. You can just add some strokes in some areas and add little buds and fillers like that. Then you want to go over all of the leaves. I'm not at all adding water to my paintbrush. It's just damp right now. And I'm just adding really messiness. I'm just activating the color, make it look like watercoloring. And in my paintbrush now I have that green and blue mixed. I'm going to add a few strokes, just scatter the strokes here and there. So here's a closer look at how everything looks. I like the way the colors kind of pool in one area. It just adds a variation. But I love the way this watercolor dries and gives results that you didn't plan. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I will leave links to everything that I've used in the description box below. But make sure to leave a comment if you enjoyed the real-time video or if you want me to speed up the videos in the future. I usually like to watch sped up videos, but if you like the real-time ones, I'll try to make more real-time ones. Thank you so much for spending some crafty time with me today, friends. I will leave you here with some previous videos of mine to enjoy. I hope you come back soon and make sure to click the subscribe button. Happy crafting!